Ahead on America This Week, United We Stand.
When the curve is going down, you can begin to loosen things, but we should have a mask mandate until we get this under control.
I think every public health official would love it if every single American wore a mask every single day.
Hear from the White House Coronavirus Response Coordinator, Dr. Deborah Birx.
These are large field studies. There'll be great care taken to make sure that the vaccines are safe and, of course, effective.
Pandemic expert Dr. Dena Grayson is back.
This is an attack on the very foundations of our country, on George Washington, on Thomas Jefferson, on the American flag.
Plus, my interview with the host of the Michael Knowles Show, Michael Knowles. That and so much more right now in America This Week, United We Stand. Welcome to America This Week, United We Stand. I'm Eric Bolling. Summer is in full swing, but the season feels a little different. Protesters and police are clashing in our city streets. Social distancing, quarantining, and mask wearing has become the nation's new normal as we continue to battle a global pandemic. This week, the White House Coronavirus Response Coordinator, Dr. Deborah Birx, sat down in an exclusive interview with Sinclair's chief political correspondent, Scott Thuman. Take a listen.
Doctor, thank you for the time.
Thank you.
Let's begin by just looking at a general assessment of what's going on. In more than half the country right now, we've got states that you could say are going in the wrong direction, not the right direction. I'm curious on your level of concern. Where do we sit on a scale of, say, 1 to 10?
Well, I think what we're seeing now is particularly difficult because it started with asymptomatic spread, really, under 35-year-olds, we believe. And before, you have to really get on top of it very early. And I think states had become so good at detecting outbreaks, stopping community spread throughout May. When they first see that uptick in cases and that uptick in test positivity, they almost think it's the same thing, but it really isn't. It's really much broad-based asymptomatic spread among a younger generation. We know that then becomes spread to the parents, spread to the grandparents, and that's when it becomes a very dangerous spread because of the impact.
Overall, are we in better or worse shape than we were, say, late March?
We're in better shape as a country than late March because of the ability of individuals to be treated, but also the superb care and learning of our doctors and nurses on the front line. So that has changed, but what has changed also is the level of this asymptomatic spread. And although we talked about it in March and April, when you see it, it is very concerning.
Would you like to see a mask mandate across the board?
I think every public health official would love it if every single American wore a mask every single day, anytime they were in public. And frankly, what I've told young people and others, protect your family. If you have had one of these indiscretions and been out in a large gathering, you should wear a mask at home to protect your mother, your father, your aunts, your uncles, your grandparents, because we know you can unknowingly pass the virus on because you have the asymptomatic spread.
What about the fact, though, that you'll make recommendations, the CDC, the administration will make recommendations like, let's not have packed bars, let's make sure there's mask mandates, let's not do indoor dining, for example, or very, very limited. And yet you'll have states that don't want to follow those recommendations. For the most part, the administration said, hey, states, you get to decide, but they're not always going to follow your advice.
Well, that's why I decided to go out to, and the administration sent me out to 14 states. So now I've been to every state across the South that had a substantial epidemic. I've been in every state with a substantial epidemic. So there's a very serious epidemic in the South. But what you can see is that serious epidemic in the South is moving northward. These states that we call the yellow states, the states that have between 5 and 10% positivity and rising cases, this is the moment to make that change, because by the time you see hospitalizations, you have incredible asymptomatic spread. I mean, right now, Louisiana and Alabama have almost 100% of their counties above 10%. The rural Americans often didn't experience that.
And now they are.
And now they are. In general, we're not a culture of rule followers completely. I guess I was so impressed at what we did in March and April as an American community, where we asked people to stay home, and they did. Now we're asking people to do something different that allows them to still go out, that allows them to see their parents and their grandparents and their friends, but 6 feet apart like us and wearing masks. Going into another phase where we lock everybody down again would be even more difficult.
There was a lot of chatter. I was getting emails and texts from friends who said, we're hearing that there might be a national lockdown. You know, the rumor mill is obviously very intense these days. Is that even a consideration?
Well, I think the president's made it clear that that is not an option right now, and believes that there's a way, like with Arizona, Texas, Florida, where we can make progress together. What it does require, and I just want to be very clear, it requires all of us to do the right thing. If we want our children back in school, if you want to be able to go to university, we are going to have to change our behavior in these ways of always wearing a mask, always being social distant. And, you know, it's hard to remember sometimes. You know, but sure. I almost, when someone gets too close now, I almost recoil because you're so used to now, why 6 feet? And I know that's hard for Americans, but it's possible.
You mentioned children. Do we know for certain whether or not children, say, under the age of 10 can spread the virus?
I don't. And I think we do have that primary study out of South Korea. Until I can see that in the United States, you know, how we interact, how our families interact are very different at times than other countries, and I think it's really important. I know children under 10 can get infected. Like individuals under 35, they may have a very mild or even invisible disease, but they're infected. What I don't know is how many transmit the virus.
And that's obviously a concern for reopening schools.
It's a concern for reopening schools if we don't take the precautions.
Can we get, quote unquote, back to normal until there's a vaccine?
We have this new normal. I guess what we're saying and asking every American to do is to adopt this new normal.
Thank you, Scott. Ahead on America This Week, United We Stand. Most of us have been impacted by the coronavirus pandemic. Next, the one group of people who's been hit harder than most.
United we stand, we never fall. This perilous fight, it takes one and all. Everyone stands, American strong. Strength by one equals strength by all. American values, American pride. Your neighbor needs you, each person, each time.
We stand, America.
United we stand.
We stand, America.
United we stand.
Right now, our Sinclair stations are calling on you to roll up your sleeves and give blood. Our stations have partnered with the American Red Cross and other blood donation groups for Sinclair Cares Roll Up Your Sleeves campaign. Go to your station's website or sinclaircares.com to schedule your appointment now to donate. The pandemic has been challenging for many Americans, but those who struggle with addiction have been given sort of a double hit. Funding is down for programs nationwide, and people who need people can't reach out. Medical reporter Liz Bonus from Sinclair station WKRC explains.
Breakfast, let alone a hot one. Not something any of these young women take for granted, you see here.
I was on the streets in the cold, miserable. I had nobody. I was alone.
Both Cammie Barnard and Pamela Campbell struggled with addiction.
I was in and out of incarceration for almost 10 years.
Until they were accepted into Reset Ministries, right as the coronavirus pandemic was hitting the country.
It's been a struggle with the coronavirus. I would wake up every morning at 4 a.m. to go to work to know that I was going to be sent home in 2 hours.
Reset Ministries is a faith-based sober living program in northern Kentucky for women and men who want to radically change their lives.
We're all privately funded, so we don't take any government money.
As with other addiction programs, they've struggled as a pandemic and an epidemic have begun to collide.
It's been really challenging financially. I think all of us have kind of pulled back the reins, and so we're no different. You know, funders have tightened up the folks that have contributed to us, so we've seen an impact there.
So you've had to do a lot of this in a very different time. How have you been able to sort of meet the need in this pandemic?
It's been pretty challenging. We've had to come up with new procedures about how people are coming and going in the house. Several people lost their jobs, and people pay rent. They live here, and so when the rent falls off, they're at risk of losing their place in the house because that's just a part of our funding model.
Eric Schweitzer, the executive director here, says even for traditional or insurance-based programs, addiction support is a lot tougher in a lockdown.
Our people need people, and so it's really had an impact at both of our houses for us.
The women here, though, are incredibly resilient. With help from above,
thank you for the hands that provided it, Lord.
And traditional 12-step programs below. They want those still struggling to find help.
I just believe that God had my back 100%, and Reset had my back 100%.
And hope.
If they're hopeless, if they're feeling hopeless, we've all been there.
Both Pamela and Cammie are now several months sober, reminding all of us that if you need help, even in a pandemic, it is here. And if you can support it in some way, lives within it are forever changed. For America This Week, I'm medical reporter Liz Bonus reporting.
Thanks, Liz and WKRC for that story. This week, both Moderna and Pfizer moved into stage 3 of the coronavirus vaccine studies. The studies aim to enroll 30,000 participants to gauge each vaccine's effectiveness. Joining me now to discuss is Dr. Dena Grayson, pandemic expert, is back. Dr. Dena, your thoughts on these 2 vaccines?
Well, Eric, it's still early days, but results from the first clinical trials, which were phase 1 studies, are certainly promising. The vaccine candidates were safe and well tolerated, and equally importantly, we saw that they were able to induce the production of antibodies against the virus, as well as T-cell responses, which is really important for fighting these viral infections. Those typically predict efficacy against protecting people against the virus, but the proof will be in the pudding in these large phase 3 clinical trials with results expected later this year.
I think a lot of people are concerned that everyone's rushing to get the vaccine. And again, that in and of itself is concerning. When they do decide that these vaccines are ready to go, do you want to be the first people getting the vaccine, or do you want to see how it actually works in the general population?
Well, that's what these large field trials are all about, Eric, is 30,000 people getting, dosed with the vaccine. You also have a control group as well. And remember, we talked about this on the program a couple of weeks ago. Where the rush is coming is really financial. What is happening is that we're paying to manufacture hundreds of millions of doses of the vaccine in parallel to these large clinical trials. Normally, that's not done. Normally, you wait until you have the results of the clinical trials, and then you manufacture the doses. And the reason for that is you don't know if it's actually going to work. So our country, and wisely, has taken that risk. Taxpayer dollars are being used to fund the production of these vaccine doses at risk, because the worst case scenario is, well, if the clinical trials don't pan out, we throw all these vaccine doses in the trash. But if they work out, that is great, because now we've shaved off many, many months off that timeline, and we can go ahead and start vaccinating people. But I think that people should really rest assured. These are large field studies. There'll be great care taken to make sure that the vaccines are safe and, of course, effective in protecting against coronavirus infection.
Doctor, Sinclair, we're doing this thing called Sinclair Cares Roll Up Your Sleeves campaign, and it's to entice people, it's push people to go out and give blood. Tell us what's going on in the United States blood supply.
Well, no surprise, Eric. Just like lockdowns and shutdowns and people staying home affects lots of different things. Unfortunately, that's also affected our blood supply, and we certainly have a need for a good blood supply. If you are someone that's not at high risk from COVID-19, I would encourage you to go to your local blood bank and donate blood. It truly is the gift of life.
You know, and what should be asked, so I say, assume you go there, you show up, and you're tested for COVID-19 and the antibodies. If you do have the antibodies, that's a good thing, right? That's a convalescent plasma, so to speak. Is that right?
That's exactly right, Eric. And that convalescent plasma can be used to help other people who are sick with the virus. There have been a number of people who've gotten it. The data look encouraging. Look, it's not a silver bullet to destroy the virus, but certainly for somebody that's seriously ill, convalescent plasma certainly can play a role in helping sick patients.
All right, we're going to leave it there, Dr. Dena. Thank you. And again, that's Sinclair Cares Roll Up Your Sleeves campaign. Just go to your local Sinclair station website and you can find out what to do and how to proceed from there. Dr. Dena, as always, great to have you on, and we'll see you again very soon.
Thanks, Eric.
Ahead, I talk with the host of the Michael Knowles Show on the state of culture in America. My conversation with Michael Knowles next. But first, as some of you know, I lost my son, my only child, to an accidental overdose. Eric was a sophomore at University of Colorado. One night, he bought what he thought was a Xanax on campus. What he actually bought was a pill that looked exactly like a Xanax, but was laced with deadly fentanyl. Fentanyl is an opioid which is smuggled into the U.S. via tunnels and other borders. Just a few tiny grains of fentanyl, much like salt, can kill a 200-pound person immediately. It's that dangerous. I have a saying I tell when speaking to young people in schools or on stage: one pill can kill, and it did. I'm now committed to shining a bright light on the opioid crisis. I'll be doing a lot more investigative stuff. I'm going inside a massive drug bust. I'm headed to the cocoa fields of Colombia and Bolivia. I'll bring back footage to show you exactly what is going on with drugs in America. It's big business, and you deserve to know how it's getting here and how much more we can do to stop it. Dope Inc., so to speak. It's a killer. I'll document it all. Stay tuned.
United we stand, we never fall. This perilous fight, it takes one and all. Everyone stands, American strong. Strength by one equals strength by all. American values, American pride. Your neighbor needs you, each person, each time.
We stand American strong.
United we stand.
We stand American strong.
City by city, state by state, town by town, stand American great. Everyone stands American strong. When strength by one equals strength by all.
American values, American pride. Your neighbor needs you, each person, each time.
We stand American
United we stand.
We stand American
United we stand.
Last week, a Missouri couple was charged with unlawful use of a weapon for brandishing guns during a protest outside their home. I had the opportunity to speak with the host of the podcast, The Michael Knowles Show, Michael Knowles. Take a listen.
Well, it's an inversion of what we should be seeing, because you have these violent mobs who have wrought violence all over the country, but especially here in St. Louis. They descend on this couple's property. They are threatening them. They are threatening their lives and their property. And that's perfectly fine. They don't get in trouble. But the couple that actually decides to defend their lives and property, they are now in trouble. This is a broader theme that we've seen all around the country. I think that the governor did a great job by saying that he would pardon this couple. They did absolutely nothing wrong. This is a radical left installed circuit attorney here, Kim Gardner, who is pushing this. She should be ashamed of herself. I love that Senator Hawley is pushing back and saying there ought to be a civil rights investigation of her. This is a great example of Republicans and conservatives needing to flex the political power that they currently have for the good, while the left is always flexing their political power to do things that are deeply un-American.
You know, and I think the charges were misuse of a firearm. If defending yourself, your body, and your property is a misuse of a firearm, I can't figure out what the proper use of one is.
Exactly. I think that the Second Amendment exists so that we can protect ourselves from roving gangs and mobs, and also from tyrannical government, all the way up and everything in between. If you cannot use your firearm to protect your family and your property, then there is no purpose to the Second Amendment. And I think, frankly, that a lot of the far left activists who are pushing for the McCloskeys to be punished, I think that's what a lot of them would like to see.
You know, I think the NBA said that they're going to put Black Lives Matter on the court. I have absolutely no problem with them doing that. But at the same time, they're saying it's okay to not show up or kneel for the national anthem. Some of the other things going on. Tell us what's happened in culture in America in the summer of 2020.
Well, the issue with culture is it's now encouraged in our games, in Hollywood, in the media. It is encouraged to desecrate the symbols of our country, even the very symbol, the American flag, the Star-Spangled Banner. You know, early on when Colin Kaepernick started all of this a few years ago, he said that it was a protest about modern police brutality. And I think a lot of conservatives knew better. And we said, no, it's not. You're protesting the country itself, because the Star-Spangled Banner is the symbol of the whole country. They pushed back. They denied it. Then all of a sudden, Colin Kaepernick was opposing the Betsy Ross flag, the flag of the American Revolution. We said, I don't think there was a lot of police brutality back then. And now we see the whole game. This is about an attack not just on a few bad police officers, an infinitesimally small number of bad police officers. This is an attack on the very foundations of our country, on George Washington, on Thomas Jefferson, on the American flag. It is disgraceful. Sports, athletics have always had a patriotic quality to them. This goes back all the way to ancient Greece. And if our sports are going to desecrate our country, I don't see any reason why we should support them.
And interestingly, your co-host on the verdict, Ted Cruz, got into quite a little bit of a tiff with Mark Cuban, the owner of the Dallas Mavericks, and it's centered around something very interesting to me. So here they're protesting, I guess, imbalance of power here, or unfairness of treatment for blacks and whites and cops and whatnot. Yet in China, the human rights atrocities continue to go on, and Mark Cuban was hard pressed by your co-host Cruz to point a finger at China, and now we all know the NBA sells a lot of product into China. So tell us what that little back and forth is all about.
Well, Mark Cuban and the entire NBA is owned by China. It goes beyond even sports. Hollywood is owned by China as well. And so they will make a grand show of attacking America, but they won't utter one word in support of pro-democracy protesters in Hong Kong. They won't utter one word against the genocide that is taking place right now by the Chinese Communist government against the Uyghur minority population in China. They won't utter a word about it. You know, when Senator Cruz challenged Mark Cuban to support, these oppressed people in China, he said, I won't do that, but I will attack America. And this gets to a point that I've noticed for the last few months now. The left prattles on and on about institutional oppression, institutional racism. But the left controls every major institution in America. They control the mainstream media, they control Hollywood, they control big tech, they control administrative government, they control everything.
One more.
And so if there were institutional oppression,
Mike.
That's right.
One more.
It'd be them.
Academia. They control academia.
Academia,
and that's where all this thought process starts. We're going to leave it right there. Michael knows, the Michael Knows Show, and again, Verdict Podcast. Thank you again, Mike. Don't forget to set your DVR so you never miss an episode of America This Week, United We Stand. To find out when we air in your city, go to facebook.com/America Bowling, all one word. We have a complete list of cities at the top of that page. Also, don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel. If you missed a show or want to rewatch an interview, you can catch them all there.
United we stand, we never fall. This perilous fight, it takes one and all. Everyone stands, American strong. Strength by one equals strength by all. American values, American pride. Your neighbor needs you, each person, each time.
We stand America strong.
United we stand.
We stand America strong.
United we stand.
You plus Stir, the new free TV. Stir streams local news, live and on demand, classic TV, and more. Plus, binge watch for free. Stir delivers 100 plus extra channels with more than 5,000 hours of TV shows and movies. And the biggest plus of all, it's all free. No subscription necessary. You plus Stir. Download now. Stir, the new free TV.
Want to watch America This Week? United We Stand on the go? Download the Stir app to your Android, iPhone, or smartphone. Stir TV is always 100% free TV, and you can watch all of our previous episodes on demand. You can also watch us live by tuning in every Sunday at 7:30 a.m. and 11:30 p.m. on the Stir City Channel 1. The CEO of Goya Foods, Robert Unanue, became the target of a boycott after he said we are, quote, truly blessed to have President Trump. But that boycott backfired big time. One of our producers, Casey Harper, has more on the story.
Cancel culture erupted earlier this month when Robert Unanue, CEO of the Hispanic food company Goya, said this about President Trump.
We're all truly blessed.
In response to the outrage, I started a fundraiser that raised over $300,000 in 2 weeks. Buy Goya for the hungry and stand up to cancel culture. The boycott had become a boycott, and that means it's time for a Goya shopping spree. Some of the money was spent cleaning off shelves of local grocery stores to fill our rented U-Haul truck. The rest is going straight to Goya Foods, who has agreed to deliver the rice, beans, canned vegetables, and other items for free to those who need it in the D.C. area, as well as Texas and Florida, where COVID-19 has thrown many onto hard times. One of those pantries is the Arlington Food Assistance Center outside of Washington, D.C. They're right behind me, and they received $38,000 worth of Goya Foods from donors who are tired of political correctness. Jeremiah Houston works at AFAC. He said because of the coronavirus, grocery stores stopped donating food right when many have turned to the pantry for help.
We're all in this together, for better, for worse, so as long as we keep doing good, that's what we should be doing.
It looks like people saw standing up to cancel culture and feeding the hungry as a win-win. For America This Week, I'm Casey Harper.
Thanks for joining me for another episode of America This Week, United We Stand. Congressman John Lewis laid in state at the U.S. Capitol this week. Lawmakers and Americans were able to pay their respects to the civil rights icon and lawmaker. Lewis is the first African-American lawmaker to lie in state at the Capitol Rotunda, a tribute reserved for the most distinguished government officials and military officers. Tonight, we leave you with images of that event. See you next week.